All right, I don't know.
Well, I guess.
Although
What
he's
is this
he's
one?
blonde and you're dark haired, so maybe like dark Jaden, light Jaden. I don't know.
I think
We'll
girl,
see.
boy works better.
Okay, boy Jaden, girl Jaden. All right. So we left off talking about the chin. Remember, or those of you who are new, even though it starts with a Q, ING. All right, it's pronounced chin because under the old transliteration systems it was CHIN. All right, but this one's a bit more accurate. But it is where we get the name China from, and when it came to the Qin dynasty, a lot of the quote unquote modern Chinese stuff comes from them. In addition, it is under the Qin dynasty, and I'll come back, but we are going to talk about it, that we do get the development of basically what today becomes modern China. All right. Up until now, everything that we've looked at and everything that we've talked about when we said China has been like within this area. Okay. Remember, the Qins are actually Manchurian. They're actually foreigners. Okay. And so yeah. Okay. Now, as I said, oh, there it is. Okay. Acquire new territory, and of course, they do change their own customs and their own traditions. They do adopt to the things that they inherit because they are in fact Manchurian. They are a minority, and so they basically go along with what the majority of the population does. Okay. Now, they do in fact, okay, reinforce a patriarchal system. We've already seen that, yes, male children were favored and the male line was dominant. And, ladies, when you married into a family, that was it. It wasn't just like you took their name. You basically, yes, you abandoned your own family and your husband's family was now everything to you. Okay? A couple other things that we see during this time. We see the continued promotion of, family and traditional values. So, ladies, you give yourself to your husband's family, have lots of babies, preferably boys, but, still bear children, okay? And of course, everything that you did was for, your immediate family and your husband's family. One of the things that the Qin dynasty promoted in this case, because it is a statistical fact, ladies, you will live longer than men, and you will probably outlive your husbands at some point. But especially those who lost their husbands young, widows were encouraged to not remarry. Okay, that they should be loyal to their husbands, to their family, even after death. Okay, in many cultures, especially ladies, if you're young, you are encouraged to remarry, to find another husband, etc., etc. Same thing with men. Now, this restriction was not on men, of course. Your wife dies young, go find another one. Your wife dies old, well, find another one, find a young one, type of thing. But ladies, you were encouraged to remain pure for your dead husband, okay, to honor him, to honor his family, to honor whatever, okay? Veronica says, no way, I'm going to the casino, meeting, some old guy. Whatever, okay? Or young, I don't know what Veronica likes, all right? Now, in addition, during this time, under the Qins, we do see an increase in taxes, okay? And most of that, though, went to the working and lower classes, which we do see in a lot of cultures of this time. The nobility, for some reason, doesn't pay, okay? Religions don't pay, but the people that are paying the bulk of the taxes are the lower class. Okay, and so because of this, many of the peasants, of course, remember, what did the government only accept as tax payments? Silver. Since most of the peasants didn't have a lot of silver, okay, they paid their taxes in food, in goods, in commodities, in the things that they actually made. All right, and so they quite literally started running out of rice, okay, because they not only are eating it, not only are they going through periods of feast and famine, but it's what they're using to pay their taxes with. Fortunately, and here's the other thing why, okay, Columbus Day, Columbian Exchange, okay, corn and sweet potatoes from the Americas via the Spanish when they came to the Philippines and then from the Philippines to China, okay, corn and sweet potatoes make it to China, and so corn becomes poor people food in China, all right, because it's the poor that begin to plant it, and that's what they begin to eat, and then later on sweet potatoes arrive. I guess they didn't like normal potatoes, but the sweet potatoes, those are pretty good. Sweet potato fries, I'll pay the upcharge. So it becomes a staple. Now, just be aware that in many of these Asian cultures, corn and sweet potatoes are considered, poor people, lower class food, because it's the only thing that they could grow after they, had to give up all of their rice. All right? Now, okay? So, anyways, by 1759, okay, we begin to see then an organization of the different trade and the various groups that are trading with Europeans. They don't want to see what happened in India happen in China. Okay, they are aware that even though the Mughals are nominally in charge, okay, many of the merchants in India are in fact basically working for themselves, and so they institute what is called the Canton system. It's named after the city of Canton, all right, where it is the only city for now that is open to Europeans. Okay, what ends up only Canton was open to foreigners. So English, Dutch, French, Portuguese. You wanted to trade with China, you had to go to the city of Canton. Number one. Number two, within the city of Canton, while at first it was open to any merchant, to any whatever, to buy, sell, trade, negotiate with the Europeans, eventually, though, of course, they established what's called a guild, and you had to pass certain requirements and pay certain fees and agree to give a portion of what you earned to the guild, and the guild in turn would pay it to the government. Okay, and only guild members, all right, could trade with the Europeans. All right, if you were caught trading with Europeans either outside of Canton or as a non-guild member, you were executed. All right, it was a death sentence. All right, and like I said, they didn't want happening in China what had ended up happening in India, where it was basically a free-for-all, and the government was benefiting nothing out of all of the trade that the Europeans were bringing. Okay, in addition, under the Qin, and I think I showed you on the map. Okay. They forced other areas, okay, including Korea and Vietnam and other countries in Southeast Asia. If they didn't outright conquer them, they at the very least subjugated them and then forced them to pay money, to pay tribute, okay, to pay in goods. And of course, obviously, within the threat of, hey, you don't, we'll just invade you and take it anyways. Bless you, okay? And then finally, as I mentioned already, and as I showed you on the map, but I'm going to show you again, all right? The Qin do, in fact, conquer a lot of new area. Now, we look at the map and we think, okay, whatever, yeah, it's China. No, this is huge. This is ginormous, all right? The area in China is not as big as Russia, but definitely bigger than what we have here in the United States, and especially I know we see pictures of overpopulation and the big cities, but most of this area out here, while there is the occasional large city, is still pretty open. Even today, even in 2026, it's still, yeah, most of it is mountains. All right, so it's not like you're gonna like establish these big cities there, but it is pretty like open. And of course, as the Qin are spreading into these new areas, eventually Europeans realize, you know what, there's way more of us than there are of them, because most of them are on that side of China, like way over there, trying to bring it under control. And yeah, even though they tell us we can't do anything outside of Canton, there's really no one here to stop us. So once Europeans, realize that they do have the numbers and the power and especially the weaponry, and then later on the financial influence, China, pardon my Chinese, really gets like fucked over.
Oh, yeah.
Big time, all right, when it comes to Europeans taking over. All right? Questions, because now we will move to Japan. Okay. Now, once again, as I gave my disclaimer at the beginning of the semester and before we talked too much about China, Asian history was not my specialty. Although I have studied some of it, it wasn't like one of my focuses. Thank you. Well, it is a Latin word. So if you have like deep, serious questions, I can direct you to Professor Alakwa, because he actually lived in Japan, and I know he does a lot of Japanese history. Otherwise, hey, I'm just as knowledgeable as you guys, maybe a teeny bit more, but because some of it is interesting, okay? And so we actually start. We start partially because I skipped over it, but partially because even your textbook doesn't have a whole lot. Around the 1500s. Okay, Japan is in a period of instability. There is no unified government per se. There is an emperor, there is a structure, but it is very weak, and it is like in charge in name only. Okay, most of the real control, okay, over the various parts of Japan are done by local families, and these families are led by daimyos, okay? My Japanese is horrible. They're led by basically local warlords, okay? Now, under their command are private armies, which are known as samurai, okay? Just as an FYI, the system in Japan during this time was similar to the feudal system in Europe, in that you did have warriors who pledged their loyalty to a daimyo, to a lord, and then that lord could call them out and do whatever, and above them, was maybe another daimyo, another lord, that, you call your subsequent lords, and, then they rally to you, and so on, okay? Now, obviously there were some differences, but at its most basic, okay, it was a type of feudalism. Okay, and so, okay, within your territory, as the family, as the daimyo, okay, you basically made the rules, you enforced the laws, you kept charge of things. Okay, like I said, there was an emperor and there was a type of central government, but it was powerless. It was more of a figurehead. Okay, Japan was basically an island of multiple teeny little kingdoms, fiefdoms, each of them under the control of a daimyo and his samurai. Okay, now, your textbook, and in many cases, when it comes to Japanese or certain Asian names, it's reversed. Tokugawa is the family name. Ieyasu is the given name, okay? I'm just going to say Tokugawa because it is way easier. Like I said, my Japanese is horrible. All right, so way easier for me, okay? He is the daimyo of a province, of an area, and at some point, other daimyos try to rise up and take power. They try to bring different groups together, okay, by force, okay? He doesn't want to be a part of this group. So he fights back, okay, and he is able to beat them off. He is able to defeat them in battle, okay? And so at the end of these skirmishes, okay, his army, his samurai, and his district is the most powerful one in Japan, because he's able to, maintain control, while some of these other daimyos are either fighting amongst themselves or facing all kinds of defeat. And so what ends up happening, okay, is that in 1603, he ends up taking control of Japan because everybody else has been so weakened during these Civil War type conflicts. Okay? Now, he doesn't take the title of emperor, but yes, he takes the title of shogun. Shogun is basically the military ruler of Japan, and he's the one that actually calls all the shots. Okay? Yes, the emperor is still there. We can't get rid of the emperor. The people still, follow the emperor. The emperor is considered divine, or at least part divine, In Japan, the emperor was considered a descendant of the sun god. Or no, not the sun, I'm sorry, the sun, the actual sun. All right, sorry, I'm getting Egypt thrown in there by mistake. See, I told you, Asian history is not my best. All right, but they assumed that he was descended from the sun, and so he's a figurehead, okay? Everything is done in the name of the emperor, but it's the shogun that is making all the decisions. It's the shogun that is doing all of this, okay? Now, okay? And so we enter a period known as the Tokugawa shogunate, okay? First thing Ieyasu does is he makes the title of shogun hereditary. Okay, now that I've given myself this title, now that the emperor has given me power and control, we're going to make sure that my family keeps that, because obviously, I'm going to die at some point. Okay, so we're going to do it the same way that the emperor passes on his title. Okay, oldest son, oldest son, oldest son, oldest son, oldest son. Okay, so that way the title passes on. Through my family. Number one. Okay, and so that's why we call it the shogunate, because it eventually, it is a multi-generational thing where members of the Tokugawa family, continue ruling over Japan as shoguns. Okay, number two, okay, the capital of Japan had been at the city of Kyoto, which is still there, all right? Yeah, okay. But he moves it to a city called Edo. That was the original name. Once the Tokugawas take over Edo, they improve it, they build it, they add on, it becomes the center of power, so it changes the name to Tokyo, all right? Just so you know, okay, the Tokugawas, all right, starting in 1603, are the shoguns, are the rulers of Japan until 1867. Okay, so, that's a good, help me with math, like 260 something years? No? Yeah? 264. Yes, a long time. 264, I want to say, but I'm not sure. 260. I'm just going to leave it there. Round it up, down, or wherever it is. 260 years, okay? One family rules over Japan. Okay? Now, Japan is at peace. Japan is united. Okay? The Tokugawas are in control. The emperor is the figurehead. Okay? What about the other warlords? What about the other families? Okay? Well, the ones that are loyal to the shogun, okay, they become basically tax collectors. All right, it's like, okay, you can have, Michaela, you still have control of your province. Schmitty, you still have control of yours, but now instead of keeping all the money for yourselves, you got to send 80% taxes, to the capital, and but I love you guys, and you guys are great, and we'll give you your own armies, and all of this other stuff. And so, in order to gain favor with the shogun, okay, and so in this case, though, it's not Michaela, it's not Schmitty that are going to go out on their own to collect taxes. And so it is during this time that, for a while, the samurai, bless you, become basically administrators. They become bureaucrats, all right? They start losing their warrior-like ethos. And that's part of the reason why, by the 1860s, they do, in fact, overthrow the Tokugawas, because it's like, we used to be warriors, now we're paper pushers. We file things, and we collect taxes, and we keep ledgers, and we do accounting. On occasion, like, we'll go out and pretend fight with our swords and practice. But we used to be warriors. We used to be a lot more. Okay, but of course, in an era of peace, okay, we do end up seeing prosperity. Okay, and once again, I know I have said it over and over again, especially to those of you that took History 1 with me. More people, more food, more food, more people. When there's a surplus of food, this allows the people who aren't farmers, who maybe want to explore other things, to actually explore other things, because they don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. All right, I know that Mackenzie is going to grow enough food to feed me, so I'm going to focus on making better tools, better weapons. I'm going to focus on inventing the wagon, or rubber wheels for wagons, or whatever. Okay.
Ooh, good catch.
I know, still a little bit spill. All right, so okay, map coming. These are the original divisions of the various fiefdoms here. Okay, eventually they do all come together. Okay, under the power of the Tokugawas. Okay, Kyoto is right here. It still exists. Okay, in fact, I believe if you're into manga, there is a huge manga museum in Kyoto. My kids went to Japan in September, and that's what they went to go see. All right, but the city of Edo, the city of Tokyo, okay, right there, okay, type of thing. Now, of course, with Europeans, okay, we do get, okay, Europeans coming in to Japan, but the first Europeans to come to Japan, unlike China or India or some other places, aren't exclusively merchants. Some of the first Europeans to come to Japan are Christian missionaries. Okay? Yeah. They come, okay, to convert people. Okay? Now, of course, the Japanese couldn't tell the difference between the missionaries and the business people, and so they just allowed, various groups in with the promise of, number one, we want those guns that you guys are carrying around, and number two, we want the things that you keep giving some of these other Asian countries, all right? Unlike the Chinese, they weren't like, we just want your silver, okay? Japan had silver. But we like those toys, those other things that you're carrying along. Okay? Now, once again, for a while, missionaries and other people preaching Christianity are allowed. As long as the business people come in, and as long as you bring technology and guns, all right, we will allow you to do what you're going to be doing.
Missionaries and guns, I don't know. In my head, they just don't.
Hey, however you get people to listen to you. Now, what ends up happening is Christianity is popular, like fairly, not overwhelmingly, but fairly popular amongst the Japanese. And the thing is, though, and no offense, but every now and then this is one of the issues that you see with certain religions, is that they are very intolerant of other religions, of other ideas. Okay, I know. And so in this case, number one, Christian missionaries are pushing the supremacy of Jesus, that no, you don't have to listen to the shogun because the word of God is superior to the laws of the shogun, and the word of God is superior to the laws of man, and the laws of God are superior to whatever. And so, just an example, thou shalt not kill. So if they force you to go into the army and go to war, no, you need to say no to them, type of thing. And I've seen that in a lot of places, okay, number one. Number two, and this we see a lot of, but it really, really happened in Japan. And I mean, we've seen a lot of historically. Amongst the Christian faiths, the missionaries fought with each other because there are different brands of Christianity, okay? You have the Catholics, you have Protestants, you have the Baptists, you have the Methodists, you have the Evangelicals, you have all these groups, and each one of them is teaching something different. And we do see, especially amongst Europeans, that religious wars have been like my Jesus can beat up your Jesus, and so, or my Jesus is better than yours, type of thing. Okay? Yeah, I know, right? And so many of these missionaries fought amongst themselves or caused problems in, trying to bring converts. And so eventually, anyone who was teaching religion was forced to leave Japan. Okay? Now, once again, the Japanese really couldn't tell the difference between the people that were there strictly to convert people to Christianity and the ones who were selling things. Okay? So, the Japanese actually, number one, expel everyone. Okay? Every European. Okay? Not just the religious ones, but everyone, with the exception of the Dutch. We'll get to the Dutch in a minute, number one.
You stay, give us money.
Number two, part of the problem they saw was also the fact that, we had let Europeans arrive and we had let them go pretty much everywhere. We kind of should have followed the example of the Chinese and only allowed them access at one place, okay? And so basically all of Japan gets closed off except, for certain ports. Now, Japan is actually a series of 4 major islands and a bunch of smaller ones. Honshu is the big island, okay? It is like when we think of Japan, okay? That's the big one, okay? Then there's like Okinawa, which is like a teeny thing off to the bottom, and then Hokkaido, which is like another like big island up at the top, up in the north, and stuff like that. Well, now they're like, no, all trade is on the main island in Honshu. And of course, we're going to try to improve on what the Chinese did. The Chinese only allowed Canton. We're going to allow just a couple of ports, okay? Now, why are the Dutch the only ones allowed to trade with the Japanese? Because they were the only European power to never send missionaries, okay? The Spanish sent missionaries, the Portuguese sent missionaries, the English sent missionaries, the French sent missionaries. All of them sent missionaries to try to, convert people to some brand of Christianity, except for the Dutch. All the Dutch cared about was money, okay? Religion will just get in the way, number one. Number two, and this is where hopefully you remember, most Dutch people are Calvinist. What is one of the core fundamental tenets of Calvinism?
Keep all your beliefs and everything.
Schmitty?
You're either born to be like condemned or you're born to go to heaven. Isn't it that one?
You've already been chosen to go to heaven.
Good or bad.
If you're not one of the chosen, you're going to hell no matter what. Conveniently, the Japanese were not part of the chosen ones. So why would we want to convert them? They're still going to hell anyways, Because obviously if they had been the chosen ones, they would have been born in the Netherlands as Calvinists. I mean, the logic is sound, right? It's flawless, actually. So because the Japanese weren't part of the chosen ones, there's no point in trying to convert them. There isn't. All right? So we're not sending missionaries. We're just sending people to try to make as much money as we can off of them. All right? But of course, you know, it's the other Europeans that ruin it. And anyways, okay, yeah, someone always, you know, it's fun until someone, you know, gets expelled, you know. Anyways, now, that's not to say that Europeans did not somehow get access to Japanese goods, because there were always ways around it. Number one, there was China and Korea, okay? Because this ban was only against Europeans, not all foreigners. So the Japanese still traded with the Chinese and with the Koreans. And so if you really wanted Japanese goods and you were European and you weren't Dutch, just go to Korea and trade with the Koreans for Japanese stuff, or go to China and trade with the, I mean, the Chinese were willing to trade with you, you know, say, hey, you got any extra of that Japanese stuff, type of things, okay, number one. Number two, okay, because, okay, it was the Dutch that, you know, were the only ones allowed, the shogun was basically like, okay, we are never going to allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by Europeans again. And part of that is learning their system and learning their language, okay? And so, the shogun basically picks groups and says, you guys need to learn Dutch. That way, we can listen in on what they're doing. We can understand what they're talking about, okay? Once you guys learn Dutch, you guys then need to study their technology and replicate it over here. Because once we can do that, we don't need them anymore, because we can make it ourselves, okay? And the interesting thing is that once the Japanese committed to that, they went from being like a quote unquote primitive Asian power to like a military powerhouse in less than 50 years. Okay, they basically went from a feudal society
They want to be honor students.
to industrial giants. Okay, we're not there yet. For now, they're doing okay. Just learn Dutch and then start learning some of their technology, and then, you know, we'll be able to start making some of it on our own. Okay, so yeah, all right, that is Japan. Okay. We will look at Europe again, but we will look specifically at Russia now, okay? Because out of all of the European countries, Russia was the most backwards. Russia was the slowest. No offense, any Russians in here, okay? Russia was literally like the sickly, you know, old man of Europe, okay?
Trying to conquer now. No.
Yeah, basically. Okay. Now, during this time, because Russia starts off as just a couple of provinces, it's actually centered in modern day Ukraine at the beginning. But then when the Mongols invade, the Mongols basically destroy the entire system that had been set up. And of course, in this case, once, you know, the plague and all of that and the Mongols begin to lose power, local tribes, especially the tribes around an area called Muscovy, which eventually we anglicized to Moscow, all right, they begin to take charge and they begin to push the Mongols out, and mixing with other local tribes and then mixing with Viking invaders, okay, we begin to see the beginnings of what becomes modern European Russians, okay? Now, remember, subtract by 100. So in the 14 and 1500s, the 15th and 16th century, okay, Muscovy begins to expand and seize more and more land as the Mongols have been pushed out, and as other tribes begin to rise up, they realize that, hey, we don't want to be under the control of anyone else, okay? And so it happens really, really fast, too. This is how weakened and how sparsely populated most of not only European Russia, but Asian Russia was during this time, okay? They are able to defeat the descendants of the various Mongol tribes, okay, because it's been about 250 years, all right? And so the people that were left behind, those descendants, they come under Russian control, okay? By the 1590s, so in less than 100 years, the Russians had reached Siberia and were building military outposts out there, okay? By 1639, okay, the Russians had made it all the way to the Pacific coast, okay? So they had basically conquered everything from Europe to the Pacific. Now, that's not to say that it was under firm control, but all of that now was considered Russian territory, okay? And it happened really, really fast, number one. Number two, now I have kind of studied just a little bit of Russian history. One of the things that a lot of writers like to compare it to is the conquest of the American West. They find, I've read a couple articles that compares the conquest of Siberia and Asian Russia to the conquest of, could just push me back, to the conquest of Oklahoma and the Dakotas and like everything in the Americas, because the Russian army came in, they slaughtered the locals, and the ones that survived, they made them go onto certain parts. All right. Yeah, they didn't call them reservations, but yes. All right. They made them go onto certain parts of land. And so today it's interesting because I have met Asiatic Russians. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had a girl from Russia here. I thought she was Japanese. But no, she was Russian because she's like, oh no, I'm from Eastern Siberia, like from where like the original Mongol Asian people are from that were conquered by Russia, put on reservations, but now we're expanding, we're getting land back, blah, blah, blah. And, she spoke great Russian according to the other Russian students around here, type of thing. And so, yeah, okay, very similar to the way the Americans conquered the Old West. Anyways, okay, in 1584, okay, there is one family, okay, that basically takes control of all this, and that is the Romanovs. Okay, the Romanovs become the ruling family of Russia. They're basically the only ones because once they take over, they don't lose power until 1917, and that's when the communists take over. So Russia in its history, basically, or in its modern incarnation, has only ever had one royal family. All right. Well, but then again, so have the Austrians. So never mind, not unique. All right, but still pretty unusual because Russia is such a big territory. You'd think there'd be other families that would have risen up and taken over, but they didn't. Okay. The Russian king is known as Tsar. Now, this is the spelling that I'm most familiar with, Tsar. But once again, it's the weirdness of transcribing from the Russian alphabet to Latin. I've seen it spelled Tzar, I've seen Czar, and I've seen Csar. Okay? Yes, any of those are correct. If you guys are spelling it, as long as there's a AR in there, okay, boom, I'm good. All right? But yes, the most common one, the one that I go with is TSAR. Okay? And it's Russian for Caesar. Okay, so once again, we see the influence of the Roman Empire. Okay, the all-powerful person, okay, is the Tsar. Okay, now, we'll talk about absolutism on, I'm looking at the clock, Monday, okay, but the Russians create an absolutist government, okay, I'm sorry, the Romanovs, okay, because, they conquered an area that was so sparsely populated, they subjugated a people with such brutality, okay? And even amongst themselves, they wanted to make sure that power was concentrated with only a select group of people, that even other Romanovs weren't safe. They were eliminated if they were seen as a threat. And so basically the Tsar had all power, okay? Absolute power. Now, one of the things that we don't really have time to talk about is the fact that the Tsar was also considered a religious figure. And so, once again, we get the whole concept. They were Eastern Orthodox, but you once again get this whole concept of the Tsar has been chosen by God to be an absolute ruler. He is the absolute word of God. Yes, we have the patriarch. That's what they called their popes. We have the patriarch, but the Tsar is just as important. Okay? And so, he might delegate, but the Tsar was the only one who could declare war. The Tsar was the only one who could sit in judgment. The Tsar was the only one who could make money. The Tsar was the only one who could make laws. I would assign people to enforce them, but it was the Tsar who did everything. Okay? When we talk about the nobles, okay, and I know I've said this before, but just FYI, okay, nobles are also royalty, but they're like the extended family of the main ones, okay? So what happens to one of my cousins? Thanks, cousin. All right? Cousin here is never going to be Tsar. They're too far removed from the direct line, okay? It's my kids that are going to be the next Tsars, okay? But still related. So those groups also had some power and authority, and as long as my cousin here doesn't pose a threat to me or to my children, we will give them government responsibility. Okay? Of course, if I find out that you're raising an army to try to overthrow me, then yeah, I kill you, kill your wife, kill your kids, and anyone else. Okay? I don't care if you're my cousin. All right? So, the nobility were the state officials. Okay, cousin, Minister of War. Okay? My other cousin, Minister of Agriculture. Okay? My other cousin, all right, you are Minister of Finance. All right? You're in charge of the money and all that. So, they're the ones that did everything. Of course, I have final and absolute word. So my cousin Mackenzie says, hey, Santos, we're facing rapid inflation. I think we need to cut back on imports from Poland. And I'm like, screw you, cousin. I love pierogies. All right? We're still trading with Poland. I don't care what you say. Okay? But if I was a good Tsar, I'd say, okay, do what you got to do. Tell them it's under my name. All right? And so, out goes Mackenzie, our finance minister, and says we're putting an embargo on Polish goods. We're only, eating Russian, pirushki, and that's it. And it's like, well, you're not, no. Tsar Santos said I could call the shots, so you want to take it up with him? You really want to bother him with this one? So there we go. Okay?
How much do you like your head?
Yeah. How old are you? Not counting yesterday? All right, type of thing. There were no government assemblies. There were no, no voting, no deciding, no councils. Okay? I tell, my war minister to declare war, does it. Okay, or war minister says, hey, cousin Tsar, we need to go to war with the Lithuanians. And I say, okay, do what you got to do. All right, take the army. All right, type of thing. All right. Now, of course, Russia's huge. Okay, so I've got my aunt over here who, who says, hey, Santos, I'll stay in Siberia as long as I've got control of all this land. You don't question anything I do. I'm like, of course not, Auntie. All right, you can do whatever you want. All right, and oh, by the way, I've got my sister here who says, hey, yeah, thanks, Rowan. Me and my husband, we want our own village out, in southern Russia. And it's like, okay, you and your husband just do what you got to do. All right, anything you need, just call me up. But you're in charge. If I hear any complaints, though, I might have to come visit, but otherwise, you're good to go. And so in this case, those nobles, were the ones that were basically in charge. And anybody, challenges my sister of one, and it's like, you really want me to call her brother, the Tsar? It's like, oh, no, okay, we'll do what you say. Okay? Or you really want me to call my nephew? I know technically he's the Tsar, but I'm in charge here. you know, type of thing.
Feudalism.
Okay, and so that is how Russia is governed during the 16 and 1700s. Okay, type of thing.
Rasputin during
Okay,
them too?
Rasputin is until the end. All right.
Okay, sorry, jumping the gun.
Yeah, that's not till the 1910s.
Okay.
Okay. Now, feudalism is still a thing in Russia. Okay. By now, it has been eliminated in England. Okay. Most of you guys got this question right. It's been weakened in other parts of Europe. All right. You know, it's losing its influence, its power. Peasants are gaining more rights. In Russia, though, feudalism is still the system. Okay? In fact, feudalism doesn't end until the 1860s in Russia. All right? So, sure, it's not 300 more years? Yeah, 300 more years of it. Okay? So it is going good and strong. Okay? Now, you did have what were known as communes, and eventually that becomes a communist thing. But basically, where peasants do come together and they do discuss things and they do say, how can we make this easier? How can we, do you think one of you could go talk to the noble and ask them about it? You know what? Let's all agree, okay? If all of us work really, really slowly, okay? I know you guys have done this at work. Because we always have the one person that like does everything quick. It's like, no, dude, slow down. So Schmitty's like, yep, slow down. That way, all of us look good. Yeah, I know. And so this is and I'm serious. This is what they would do. It's like, okay, you know what? They want us to grow all the food. Why don't we just do it a little slower and say, hey, we can't make the soil give us more food. We can't, it's so cold. The machines keep breaking. Like, oh yeah, we're trying to fix things, but
Put the seeds in, I
Or,
promise.
I believe it's called weaponized incompetence. Like, can you explain it to me again? Like, what am I supposed to do? Type of thing. Okay. Now, of course, in Russia, though, it was known as serfdom, and they weren't called peasants, they were called serfs, just so you're aware, okay? Although, unfortunately, I will use the terms interchangeably, but in Russia, it was serfdom, not feudalism, and they were serfs, not peasants, type of thing. But basically, it was the same system, okay? You lived on the noble's land, you had to get their permission for just about everything in your life. Moving, getting married, profession, you're the carpenter because your dad was the carpenter and his dad was the carpenter. And so, Grace says, but I hate carpentry, I want to do pottery. And so if the noble agreed, because, all right, you know what, the last potter, didn't have any kids, so yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so it's time to start learning. All right, but otherwise it was like no. Then who the hell's going to be the carpenter? Okay, because your brothers are morons. You're the only good carpenter we have, and so I'm not going to have 5 stupid carpenters and the only good one decide I want to make pots. No, you're going to be the carpenter still. In fact, I think we'll have your brothers make pots. All right. So okay now. In this case, though, I use that example because those skills, okay, it was obligatory to do things for the noble, to do things for whoever was in charge of the area. It's like, there's no question. I need my walls fixed. Mason, carpenter, get over here and fix the castle walls. All right? There's like literally no questioning. All right? And of course, in addition to that, all right, you still have to grow your own food. You're still responsible for feeding yourself. And oh, by the way, that is also the cost of me letting you live on my land, is a portion of your harvest. Okay? So in addition to the stonemason, building up my walls and fixing my castle, I'm also going to need half of your food. All right, type of thing. All right, I know. Hey, I gotta eat bread. All right, I gotta eat
And
meat.
it's
I gotta
beer
drink
and
milk.
bread. Does it have
Okay.
to be
Yes,
like-
I need the beer. Whoever's making beer, we need the beer. Okay, type of thing. All right. And so yes, Russia was. This is by the 16th. By now, feudalism does not exist in most of Europe, or at the very least, like France is one of the last ones. It's pretty much on its deathbed. Okay, the whole feudal system. In Russia, it's still going strong. Okay, for another 200 years. All right. To finish for the day and for the week. Okay, original Russia. Okay, once the Mongols are kicked out, in less than 100 years, we make it to the west. I guess to them it's the East
East
Coast.
Coast, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that American centrism, you know,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me it's the West Coast type of thing. Okay, so yeah, they conquer quite a bit and take over quite a bit in a very, very short amount of time. All right. On that happy note, we will talk about Russia's dealings with the rest of Europe on Monday.
The slide's doing the thing again that it was doing before, that it was cutting off at the bottom.